Hello, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America, featuring today's top directors sharing behind-the-scenes stories of their latest films and insights into the craft of directing. The Director's Cut is now available on Spotify, so please take a second to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. This episode takes us behind the scenes of director Stephen Merchant's new comedic biopic, Fighting with My Family. Based on the true story of wrestling superstar Soraya Page Beavis, who grew up in a tight-knit wrestling family that earned their living traveling around England performing. When Paige and her brother Zach get a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to try out for the WWE, they are ecstatic. But after only Paige earns a spot in the highly competitive WWE training program, she must find the courage to leave her family and face this new world alone. In addition to Fighting with My Family, Mr. Merchant's directorial credits include the feature film Cemetery Junction and episodes of the series Hello Ladies, Life's Too Short, The Office, and Extras. Following a recent screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Mr. Merchant spoke with director Rawson Thurber about filming Fighting with My Family. During their conversation, Mr. Merchant discusses how Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson enlisted him to direct the film, his desire to cinematically translate the experience of being in the arena during a wrestling match, and the tricky elements involved in shooting the emotional and highly choreographed finale of the movie on day 4 of production.
All right.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. You're just applauding the suit. Yeah.
What a fantastic film.
Thank you so much.
It's my second time seeing it. I loved it the first time. I think I actually enjoyed it more the second time, and I got choked up at the same points. There's so much heart in this film. Like we were chatting about backstage, I didn't know really what to expect coming in. I mean, I knew you were involved, so I knew it had to be great, but I'm not particularly a wrestling fan. Please don't tell Dwayne. And so I kind of came in not knowing. I had never seen it's based on a documentary, as I understand it, with the same title.
That's right. Yep.
And so I didn't really know what to expect, and I just found myself so caught up in the characters and the story and the heart. It's so touching, so moving. I guess I have so many questions, but the first I'd love to ask is, why did you decide to take this documentary on and turn it into what we saw tonight?
Well, it began life, as you say, as a documentary, and it was a documentary on British TV that I hadn't seen. It was seen by our friend, everyone's friend, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He was filming Fast and Furious 6 in England, and he was in a hotel and couldn't sleep. And I assume it was, a class. It was probably the presidential suite of the Best Western. And he's wearing the robe that the complimentary robe doesn't quite fit, barely covers his Dwayne Johnson. And he saw this documentary, and I think coming from a wrestling family, really responded to it and became involved with their lives as we dramatized in the film. And somewhere on the line, I think realized it was a kind of Rocky style underdog story, just sort of sitting there waiting to be pulled out. And he teamed up with this producer, Kevin Misher, and I'd worked with Dwayne before in his years, when he was still in shape. And he sent me the documentary, and I just, like you, I didn't know anything about wrestling. I wasn't a wrestling fan, and I sort of, if I'm honest, was slightly kind of, this is going to be a chore, but you do what Dwayne tells you. And and I just fell in love with the family. I just thought they were so vivid and so kind of earthy and raw, and then that moment when the brother doesn't get chosen was just a gut punch, and it just devastated me. And if I'd started the documentary kind of expecting to sneer, I was just leaning in, and I was so invested in them, and I just loved even though I didn't care about wrestling, they cared about it so much that I was just on this journey with them, and then I went to meet the family, and I discovered there was a whole sort of second act and third act to the story that wasn't in the documentary, and so like I said, I think we're all sort of always looking for characters that we can kind of respond to, and I just found them so emotional and so kind of heartfelt and funny and sweet and
all of that came through beautifully. Yeah. Well done. So when you watch the documentary and then you say, all right, I'm going to do this. How do you set about it? Because I suppose this would be different than sort of the original material that you've made. How do you know how did you decide what to deviate from, what to embrace? Having not seen the documentary myself, what did you decide to change and why?
Well, the documentary ends sort of when she arrives in America, and it kind of gives some suggestion that she's sort of, she's now part of the WWE machinery, but it doesn't really go beyond that. And so I went to meet the family, and I discovered that Zach had really struggled, psychologically and emotionally after that rejection, and it had taken him a long time to kind of pick up the pieces. And I spoke with her, and she had really struggled in America and struggled with fitting in and feeling very alone, and would phone her father every night in tears, I want to come home, and he'd say, no, you're staying there for the family, and so and then I again, not knowing anything about wrestling, I kind of plunged into the research, and then when I discovered that she'd won the title on her first ever appearance on Monday Night Raw, it's like, well, there's your Rocky kind of finale, and so that was sort of that kind of gave the shape of it, but what was tricky was that it turns out wrestling is really fucking complicated. There's so much. There's so many, not just in terms of the sort of levels of reality and what's the fiction and what's not, but just in terms of this like 30 odd years of this soap opera. There's the NXT, which is the training facility,
right,
which I didn't understand, and that has its own awards and badges and trophies, and it was just very, very complicated. And so much of the writing process was the editing of that, and kind of piecing together what do you need to know in order to enjoy the finale of the movie, really, and giving the non-wrestling audience fan just enough information that they understand and they're kind of orientated, but not overwhelm them with this endless, complicated wrestling backstory.
That's fantastic. Early in that process, did you decide to sort of focus on Zach and Paige and sort of their journeys, kind of going in opposite directions? That Paige was sort of on the upswing, even though it was a challenge, and Zach going on the down. Did that come to you early in terms of?
It just always was about that relationship.
The brother-sister dynamic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That seemed so fundamental to me, and that's kind of what gave it. I think a dimension beyond the kind of sports exceptionalism, which I was very pleased I was able to celebrate her success, but I was equally struck by what happens when you get left behind, and there are many. I'm sure there are way more people in entertainment, in sport, in anything who get left behind or who never quite make it, and that just seemed like the real kind of emotional core of it. And what do you do when that dream doesn't come to fruition?
Yeah, there's so many wonderful scenes in the film, but two that really hit me both times that I've seen the picture. When Zach is in the car and he's calling up NXT and essentially begging for his dream, and how devastating that is to hear you don't have it. You have to find something else. Yeah,
and it's just such a brutal world. I mean, they are kind of ruthless. I mean, he actually, talking about kind of, changes and things, in reality, I think he auditioned twice, maybe 3 times.
Oh, man.
And I was just thinking, I can't keep showing you this kid trying and failing. It's just too agonizing.
So you never shot that. You just
because he was gonna try audition again, and then his dad made him do a show, and he busted his leg.
Oh my gosh!
And I mean, it's like, how many times are you going to kick this guy? I mean, it was sort of. I mean, the truth was sort of even more brutal than dramatized in a way, And
thank you for sparing us.
Yeah, it was just so tough, and yes, and so I think the danger was always, I think in my original version of the script, I really lent into the sort of emotional breakdown of it, and I think the producers and Dwayne were like, "This is getting a little hard. This is hard to watch."
That's first draft.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to talk about that writing process. There was one other scene I wanted to touch on, which I just found fantastic, which was between Paige and Zach in the sort of, I guess, alleyway after the bar fight, and how they both sort of challenge each other about their lives and their journeys. Zach saying that, you stole my dream, and Paige saying, I didn't steal your dream. And just because a million people aren't applauding doesn't mean it doesn't count. I just thought that was such a powerful scene. And I'd love to talk about the writing of that, and then on the day, the directing of it, if you remember much about it, or if it's just not.
Well, I appreciate you bringing up that scene, because that was a sort of pivotal one for me, and also it was one that we used in the rehearsals and in auditions.
Oh, that makes sense.
And everyone. I saw 60 actresses for that part. It was such a difficult one to cast, and that was a scene that we kept on using. And by the time the actors actually got to use it, they were sick of it because I had made them do it so many times.
I want to talk about that.
Because it just seems so pivotal, and that they had to kind of exchange, important messages for each other at that moment, and it seemed very fundamental. That scene was very difficult. I mean, the whole shoot was very difficult, but that one was particularly complicated because that alleyway backed onto a series of stores and and one of them was a fish and chip shop that had an air conditioning unit that they would not shut off.
It's just the most important scene in my film.
And they wouldn't shut it off until they had sold all the fish and chips in this store, and there was no one in the neighborhood because it was a kind of rundown area. And so we ended up buying all the fish and chips in this store,
of
and
course,
just distributing them to people.
And then did they turn the air conditioning
homeless
off?
people, anyone, and eventually they shut it off. And so he ended up with that compressed time. And so, but luckily, because the guys were they had been well drilled on that scene by then. We were able to kind of rattle through it.
Oh man!
Quickly. Yeah.
Well, it's beautiful. But so let's back up. Skipping over a few pieces, you write a great script. They say we're going to make it. What is your casting process like? You said you saw 60 people for Paige, and ended up going with Florence, who's incredible in the film. How do you do it? How do you decide? Obviously, you've been doing this for a long time, especially having incredible success on the television side and casting beautifully. So, what's your method? And also, I'd like to know what your secret is, just myself.
Well, I I used Felicity Jones early on in her career. I used Martin Freeman early on, and now Florence. And I do feel I wish I was getting a cut of their future earnings, some of that Star Wars and Black Panther money.
No kidding.
Casting directors are obviously vital, right? And we had a great one in this. This lady Shaheen, who saw more women than I did for that part, and she was the one who kept on kind of encouraging me towards Florence, because I couldn't quite see it. She had done an excellent movie called Lady Macbeth, but it was a much more contained performance and much more sort of posh, if you like. And this was obviously this working class, rough around the edges girl, who also I needed her to be able to jump in the ring and throw herself around. And Shaheen kind of just kept saying, honestly, I think this is the one. And I worked with her a lot. She came in several times. She came in and worked with Jack, her brother. There comes that point where you're just trying to convince yourself because you don't want to get down the road and discover you made the wrong choice, right? And I put a great deal of faith in Shaheen, and Florence was just very committed to it and very passionate. And I think she delivers, exceptionally well. And, Jack was even perhaps a little easier. I just saw him on tape, and I could tell he was a great actor, but I knew that character had to get to a dark place, and hopefully the audience was still on his side. And he has such a kind of natural warmth, I think, Jack. There's something, even when he's being mean to his sister, he's kind of, there's an emotion to him that I think carries you through it. Lena amazingly came in and auditioned for me, which someone of her stature doesn't need to do. But again, if you've seen Game of Thrones, it was a hard one to compute, right? And but again, she came in and she read and we sort of workshopped it. And Nick Frost was he was a much easier kind of call, really, because he was a wrestling fan, and I knew him from various things. And so I was very, very lucky, and I didn't want Dwayne to play Dwayne. I didn't think he was the man for the job.
He begged for it.
Yeah, he begged for it.
Sure, he doesn't. When did you decide that you were going to play the father of Jack?
I just felt that we needed finally a bit of sex appeal in the movie. No, I've always thought with any acting role that I can't give myself, it's like I'm a resource. I'm on the set anyway.
Yeah.
If there's something that can be useful, I've saved money, and I know what I can do. And
Did you do craft service also? Is that?
I do a lot of of the. I drove Dwayne, and that character seemed like you needed to do a lot of reacting.
Yeah.
And to bring an actor in who's good at reacting but not give them any lines is kind of tricky.
Sure.
So I figured I was a useful.
And then the mustache was just like on the day.
Mustache was just someone
Just
applauding the mustache there. Yeah. That was just in an effort to kind of age me up slightly, because I suddenly had this sort of 21-year-old daughter.
So what was it? Sorry, we could talk about your mustache all night, of course.
Sure.
But excellent choice. But what about making this film scared you the most or concerned you the most? You're like, oh gosh, I know I can do this. I think I can do that, but this is the thing I'm not so strong about or so confident in. I want to make sure I give that extra attention or don't screw it up.
The toughest thing from the off was that we had a very compressed pre-production period.
How many weeks?
We had 5 weeks.
Whoa!
And it was insane. And
5 weeks.
5 weeks. It was a low budget film anyway, and we were prepping in London, but we were shooting here for the first week. And so we sort of landed on a Saturday, and we were like shooting on the Monday, and we had to scout locations and everything in that time. And so we were just constantly chasing us. We were constantly just kind of trying to keep ahead of ourselves and just keep our head above water. And so I think
how many days did you shoot, if you don't mind me asking?
It was about 30 days, I think. And so that was the biggest obstacle, because any grand plans I had about the careful preparation of how I was going to shoot individual wrestling sequences went out the window, and it was just grab some handheld cameras and let's
do
get
it
done,
Yeah.
And so that
there's a beautiful opening Steadicam shot when you kind of come into the
into the gym. Yeah, it was one of the few instances where we had a bit of time, breathing space to just kind of give that some consideration. But a lot of the rest of it was sort of on the fly, really. So that was frustrating, because that was not how I wanted to do it. And it was particularly difficult. The fourth day of filming was at the Staples Center with 20,000 fans. For
of course. When you're just well-oiled,
the
well-oiled machine, day 4.
And they gave us 1 hour to shoot that
my
scene
God.
after a Monday Night Raw, and so it was just
that's for the finale piece,
for
right?
The finale, and,
did you intercut with actual sort of footage from that moment?
There's nothing that was from the archive. It's
my goodness,
all done that night with like a handful of pickups the next day, and Florence just went out there and just sucked up her nerves and just went out and
so you shot the very end of the picture, the thing that sort of brings everybody gives them chills and makes them applaud on day 4.
Yes, it was. Yes, and Dwayne came down and he emceed it. That was great, and he but in all seriousness, I said to him, please don't get carried away. We've only got an hour. And he went in the ring. He did 20 minutes on the mic.
Of course he did.
It was unbelievable, doing the catchphrases. Can you smell? Yeah, we can smell what you're cooking. Get out the ring. It was just a nightmare. Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, I mean,
but the great thing was that the WWE allowed us to use their cameramen to shoot as well as our own cameras, which was a godsend.
That's wonderful. One other thing I loved in the film was the choice that you made. The 3 other female wrestlers that Paige sort of has a strained relationship with at the beginning, and then ends up having a warm relationship with at the end. I thought it was a wonderful choice just to kind of spin that the other way. So they're not. They're not mean or exclusionary, and that Paige was the one reading them wrong. When did that come to you as you were working?
Well, that was one of those blessed things where because it was a true story, and so I initially Paige's take on it was that she was bullied by these sort of mean girls, and that was sort of how I was envisioning it initially. And then I went to the WWE into the NXT training facility in Florida, and I spoke to some of her trainers and some of her former colleagues, and they were like, well, sometimes Paige was the bully. And it kind of, oh yeah, of course, right. And so she comes in and she's this aggressive, nervous, scared kid who's kind of been wrestling since she was 13, and she would lash out, and so that kind of opened something up to me. It was like, I was realizing I was kind of very much seeing the story from her perspective, and it was important to try and kind of fill in some of the other blanks. And so the family, I tried not to simply allow it to be a version of the story that the family had kind of dictated for me, and and found out about the prison time and the various things that they'd done, and the kind of darker parts of their story, which seemed important to include, because they're not angels, and so that was lucky that I think just kept on digging in the research to kind of to figure that stuff out.
I loved it. It was a lovely choice. On your, if you only had 5 weeks to prep, did you have much time for rehearsal? Are you someone who likes rehearsal when it comes to film versus
I would love
TV?
rehearsal, and we had a little bit of rehearsal time, about 3 or 4 days with the family, and the guys went off and they actually rehearsed for a week or so at the NXT to learn to wrestle.
Okay.
So they did that, and most of their downtime in that 5 weeks was either working out or wrestling training. And so we had some really good stunt guys and some really good wrestling advisors who were really good at kind of helping shape the fights. And I thought of them as kind of musical numbers, right, where you never quite use the same moves twice, and you save the kind of big falls and things for the end. And Dwayne was very good as well at just kind of restructuring them slightly, because I didn't realize that wrestling matches have a sort of movie-style 3-act structure.
Oh, you didn't, did you?
I had no idea, But apparently you sort of, the good guy always has to kind of be pummeled down until the very last minute and reemerge, which makes sense now, obviously, but it hadn't occurred to me.
Of course.
Well,
on the rest, just I have about 1,000 other questions, and we're going to open it up in a little bit to the room. But on the wrestling side of it, the actual sort of shooting of those physical ballets, did you, other than sort of pacing out the dance moves like you're saying and saving the big stuff for the end, was there a different way that you wanted to shoot those sections or those pieces, or was it just sort of a block shoot kind of deal because of the time crunch?
I think initially, I had sort of grand plans that maybe I'd do one, that was all in one take or something, or but ultimately I just didn't have the time, so they ended up becoming just grabbing what you could. I was aware of that limitation of that final fight, and I remembered in the movie The Fighter, they were had similar limitations, and they had used the HBO boxing camera team to shoot the sequences, and so that was one of the reasons I was kind of keen to use the WWE people and to kind of make it look like it's on like a broadcast, a WWE broadcast. Partly because you felt like you were watching it with the family.
For sure.
But everything else, I was trying to, as best I could. One of the things I noticed when I went to these wrestling matches is that they're very noisy and visceral, and it's a lot more kinetic and dynamic than it appears on TV. Just because the noise is so much of it, the spring of the mat and the ropes and the kind of fans, and it's a lot more sweaty and kind of spit and sawdust about it. And so that I was sort of hoping for that, and also the fact that in wrestling they do a very good job, I think, in disguising the phoniness of it. And so I didn't really want to see kind of punches being overly missed.
Right.
I was trying to let you kind of enjoy it as you would if you were at a match, and you don't see the fakery quite as much.
And so for that last one, the finale that you had the WWE cameraman shoot, how many times did you guys run through that?
We did it 4 times.
4 times.
With
you
the stunt
positions
people did it twice, and we just had I think we had one time where we could actually get in the ring and Steadicam stuff. But otherwise, I didn't even know what we were getting. I just had to it was a wing and a prayer, really.
Goodness.
Just hope that I'd just given them some basic instructions and just had to hope that. But luckily, they are very experienced at shooting wrestling.
Obviously, so they know where to put the camera. So after your 30-day shoot and your 5 weeks of prep, shooting the finale on the 4th day, in editorial, what's your process in the editing room? Are you there every day from the beginning? Do you look at a cut, an editor's cut before? Do you only look at dailies with the editor and put it together? Do you have a process on the feature side versus the television side, which might not afford that?
Well, I steel myself for that first suicide cut.
Yeah.
In this case, it was 2.5 hours long, which was insane. Given I don't know how we shot that much footage. I think the dinner party scene alone was about 30 minutes.
Oh, it's so funny. I bet it was funny all the way through too, all 30 minutes.
So much fun. That. But so then it just becomes, that with the editor just initially just paring back to the core of the story. And again, I'd shot a lot more about wrestling and just lots of scenes of kind of Vince explaining and sort of walking you through what you need to know.
Right.
And so that was sort of the first process, I think, was just kind of paring back the story. And there was sequences that there was a long foot chase sequence that we had to cut down, and lots of stuff that kind of you fall in love with when you're
Sure.
shooting that you had no time
A
for.
foot chase sequence between.
There's a bit early on where Zach is chasing this young kid
Yeah.
who he kind of rescues, and that
Sure.
was this long sequence that ran all over this tenement estate through people's front living rooms. It was
wow.
It was like Point Break, but we didn't have time for any of it. And it also included a little cameo from Paige's real parents, which I was very nervous about telling them I'd cut out. Obviously, as you can imagine.
How did they take it?
I steeled myself for that. They could break my legs, but they rolled with the punch.
Wonderful.
But
was there anything that ended on the cutting room floor that you miss? You wish you'd put back, or does this feel like what it should be?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we were pretty ruthless. A few lines here and there, but most of it, I'm sort of pleased with where we got to. I think that the toughest thing was that final fight.
Yeah.
Because of course we always knew that there was this complication that in Rocky, when he punches Apollo Creed, you understand within the rules of the film that that's a real punch and that's a real injury.
Right.
In wrestling, everyone knows it's not.
It's
real.
fixed, not
it's
fake.
It's fixed. So consequently, what's the victory if you know that it was predetermined?
That's right.
And so our assumption was always, well, the real victory is that she wins over the crowd. Mm-hmm. And so we actually shot a scene where Dwayne says to her, you're going to win the Divas title on your first appearance.
I was going to ask about that.
Which is what he did in real life. And we tested that, and people were like, no, we don't want to know the outcome before.
So you actually had it in, and then it didn't.
And we realized people actually wanted to live through the final fight.
Of course.
And kind of be in it with her. And but that was the toughest sequence to cut because we were jumping back and forth to the family and the commentary and just the sound. It was very, very complicated for what I'm sure seems very straightforward, but that was incredibly difficult. And we had about these 15 different cameras to choose from. It was just...
Oh, man, what a moment.
That was very tough.
A fantastic choice. Last question, then we're going to open up to any questions that might be out there. So you mentioned Rocky, you mentioned The Fighter. Are there any other films for you that inspired you for this film or that you looked to as you were kind of prepping?
8 Mile, the Eminem film.
The Curtis Hanson picture. It's a great one. Yeah.
Well, exactly. But also I think because it's as much a performance film as it is as a sports film, right?
That's smart.
I kept thinking of it, it's a bit like sort of 42nd Street or something, right? The kid gets their chance at the big time and don't blow it in front of the Broadway critics. And so I was thinking about sort of, musicals in that way, not so much kind of watching them, but just thinking of the structure of them. Goodness, I'm sure I watched. I watched Billy Elliot because that seemed like a good touchstone for this.
So musical and dance pictures.
Yeah.
And boxing, I suppose.
And boxing, all the Rockies, obviously.
Well,
except Rocky 6.
No, that doesn't. We know.
Rocky 5. I'm sorry, you don't need to watch Rocky 5.
Or 6, or just
6 is good.
6
Rocky 5 is wobbly.
Solid tip. I stopped after 4. But okay. Beautiful film. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you
really
so much.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Real pleasure, Steve.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more, you can find past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Also, if you're enjoying our podcast, please take a moment to rate and review us on iTunes. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow cinephiles find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.